guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here to do my June wrap up. So it is a little bit late to do the June wrap up, but anyone who knows that at the start of July, when I had meant to do my June wrap up, I ended up having my baby instead. So it has been a little bit delayed in terms of my June wrap up. I also do have her in my arms, so you might be able to hear her complain a little bit while I do this, but I'm just trying to get the opportunity now to get this done, because I actually had a really good reading month in June and I wanted to talk to you guys about it. So yeah, I had started my maternity leave in June, so I had lots of kind of relax and reading time before baby came. So I did read some really good books. I read some books that disappointed me and I'm going to tell you all about them now. So the first book that I read or finished in June was You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. I listened to this in audiobook and I did really like the audiobook narration, and however, I really thought I was going to enjoy this book a lot and I really ended up not liking it. I heard like loads of like really good things about this story, and yeah, I just went into it with kind of higher expectations, I guess, especially for the author as well, and yeah, it just really didn't do anything for me. So in this book we are following a character called Faye, who I think is 5 years previously lost her husband in an accident, and she's obviously been grieving that all that time and has found it very hard to even think about moving on. And we follow her at the point where she's decided that it's time to move on, and she's at a party, she meets a guy and she decides that this is it, he's going to be the first person that she's going to have like sex with since the passing of her husband. So we kind of follow her from there as she starts like kind of different relationships, and it's kind of exploring about what she would kind of like and who she is now without her husband. And she ends up getting into a relationship with this one guy that is kind of like a very strong friendship, but bordering on that it is a romantic relationship, and they just haven't really done all the steps, if you know what I mean. But he's like really like not obsessed with her, but he's like really into her, and they end up going on holidays to his like home country and home village or town in I think it's in Nigeria, and they go to his father's house, and his father is like this celebrity chef, and so it's kind of like a really kind of like luxury holiday for Faye, and you know, all for free as well, which is great. And while there, she kind of starts re-establishing or rethinking her relationship and what she wants out of this relationship, and it kind of goes from there. Faye is also an artist, and we see her art play a big part in this book, and how she kind of deals with her grief through her art and shows her grief through her art. And this one, I think the style of the writing I did really like, and some like, you know, like the descriptions and stuff like that I did really like. I like Akwaeke Emezi can write, I do like their style of writing. However, for me, it was the story and the characters, like the substance of the story and the characters, that I just really didn't like. I felt we didn't really get to know Faye well enough. She was just this like really beautiful creature that, you know, everyone seemed to like be obsessed with her, and everyone wanted to have sex with her, and everyone was falling in love with her. And it just felt very like unrealistic as well, that like everyone she would be into would be really into her as well, and that she would be so beautiful that like some characters would make some very kind of strange decisions when it came to being with her, and what they would sacrifice in order to be with her. There is like a trope in this book, which I don't want to say what it is, kind of like a romantic trope that you see in romance novels. I don't want to say what it is in case it's pretty much a spoiler, and I just don't know whether maybe this trope isn't for me. I found it a little bit icky, and I also just felt like characters ended up kind of going against what we had been told they were, just to kind of further Faye and her love interest's story. And yeah, I just didn't really enjoy this book. It made me feel a bit icky. I didn't like the relationships in it. I didn't like Faye as a character. I thought she was a little bit selfish and just not very nice. And in terms of dealing with grief as well, I feel like we actually never really got to know what her relationship was like with her husband. And you know, we just know that she loved him very much, of course, but we never got to know who he was, except this kind of just like perfect image in her head, and I would have liked a little bit more of that as well. So I ended up giving this a 2 out of 5 stars. It just wasn't one for me. And then after that, I read one of my favourite books of the year, and that is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne, which is a prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy, and we are following Haymitch, who is an older character in the original Hunger Games trilogy. We are following his games and what happened to him when he won his games, and how he kind of became the person that we see then in the main Hunger Games trilogy. This one was just really, really fun. As a huge Hunger Games fan, I just loved every single minute of this. I loved seeing all the characters who we know from the main Hunger Games trilogy show up in this one, and I feel like we got a lot of like, we found out a lot about the characters that made some of their decisions in the later books. Like everything just made so much more sense about why they did what they did and why they chose certain directions, even in terms of morals and stuff like that. I just think Suzanne Collins is just an excellent writer, and she's able to just like send out these messages, and then also just like she just like brings out all these bangers every few years, and I would gladly read just like so many more Hunger Games books, just because I love the world, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but I love the character she creates, and the stories and the messages she sends through her books are so important. So this was like an easy 5 out of 5 stars for me. And actually I have one of my friends at the moment is reading it, and she's like sending me her live reactions to everything that's happening in the book, and it's really fun to kind of like talk about everything again. Yeah, I loved this one. Then I read a book that was translated from Korean, and that's To the Moon by Jang, Ryujin. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. This one is kind of interesting, and I feel like this one would really resonate with anyone who's kind of like a modern day millennial or like Gen Z, I guess, office worker, or if you work with these kind of like more kind of the bigger companies that have particular type of like performance reviews and stuff like that. And we are following a young woman who has been working in this company for quite a long time, and she, you know, she does her job. She doesn't like love her job, but she goes in, does her job well, kind of has to deal with this manager who's like always really passive aggressive towards her, and you know, almost like taking credit for some of the work she does. And yeah, she's just kind of like this jaded office worker, and she ends up getting this kind of like middling performance review, that even though she's worked really, really hard on, she's just getting these like crappy performance reviews, which is basically just because the company never wants to like promote anyone or wants to limit how much kind of raises or bonuses people get. And I feel like that's a very like modern day thing that you see like in all companies, where like, you know, you can work as hard as you can, and you do your job the best job you can do almost every day, and yet your performance review is kind of like really like soul sucking, and I feel like I saw so much of my own experiences in the workforce being like really like thrown back at me in this book. Like I really resonated with so much of it, but herself and her friends end up getting into this cryptocurrency scheme, and we see how they become kind of obsessed with it, and like they just keep investing, and there's this kind of like tension that they're going to lose everything, and we see how that kind of pans out for them. And through all this, we're kind of seeing their friendship as well. They're kind of like trauma bonded. This is a real like, you know, those friends you make in crappy jobs that mean that you're like friends for life. That's basically what this friendship is like they're all trauma bonded from this job, and then they all get into this cryptocurrency. So we're just following their friendship as well, and how they deal with it, and how like really for the main character, like at the start of the book, all she really wants is like a nice place to live that isn't like this horrible bedsit that is like, you know, like not nice for her to go home to every evening. Like she hardly has room to move around. She just wants to be able to like cook a meal and relax in peace, and we see like how she tries to like achieve that for herself, and how in her current like the way her job is at the moment, it's just so hard for her to get that. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 3.5. As I said, I think if you have particular workforce experiences, particularly like office and stuff like that, I think you would actually really resonate with some of the stuff in this book. And as I said, the female friendship in it too was good. It's not the most like exciting novel or like actiony novel. It's very much kind of like more character focused in a way, I guess. But yeah, I still did quite enjoy it, and I think it surprised me in that sense as well, in terms of how much I enjoyed it. So then after that, I read Five Little Indians by Michelle Good. This is a book set in Canada, and it's kind of like modern history in terms of, I couldn't quite tell how in terms of what's happening in the book, it feels like it should be like ages ago in terms of history, but it's really not. It's very like modern. We're following 5 characters who are Indigenous Canadians, and we see how when they were younger they were sent to these kind of like Catholic missionary schools and taken away from their family, and some terrible things happened to them in these schools, and they all have kind of like real like trauma from their experience in these schools, and like they're not really prepared for the outside world. Just as soon as they hit 18, they're kind of like kicked out, and they just basically have to make their way in the world without any any experience of being in the real world. They're like, particularly for the girls, they're like very, very naive in terms of what could happen to them out in the world. And then also they're more prone to kind of like addiction, alcoholism, things like that as well. And we just see a few different characters and their life and their choices they make, and yeah, how they reckon with what happened to them, how they, yeah, the choices they make once they're out of the school, and kind of some flashbacks as well as to what happened to them in the school as well. So this one I really wanted to love, and I really like. I think the story that has been told is very important, and it did actually remind me a lot of, in terms of some of like the mother and baby homes that were run in Ireland, and how women were incarcerated in those, and kind of their choices were taken away. They were treated abominably, they were abused, and then sometimes they were just kicked back out into society without any real skills to like be able to deal with society. And yeah, so I felt like in terms of history, that, you know, it felt familiar in that kind of sense to me. However, I think the story itself, and we're following like 5 or 6 characters. I feel like it actually would have been better if we had followed less characters. And also the timeline kind of jumped around the place a little bit. Sometimes it was hard to know between each character where exactly we were in terms of timeline. It seemed to jump about, and then in general the story just felt a little bit flat for me, and I can't really pinpoint exactly why. It just wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. And I did listen to this in audiobook, and I felt the narration of that was kind of flat, so that could have hindered my experience. But I think in general the book just lacked this like star kind of quality for me that I was looking for. So I gave this like just a middling 3 out of 5 stars, unfortunately, and it just wasn't the best one for me. After that, I did do a reading vlog in June where I did talk about some of the books that I'm about to talk about, so I won't go over these too much. And the first one I finished was The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. This is a book that's quite buzzy. It's after winning the Women's Prize for Fiction, and it is set in the 1960s in the Netherlands, and we are following a character called, what was her name, Isabel? Yeah. We are following a character called Isabel who's living in her mother's house, and she lives on her own, and she seems to be this kind of like dour, stern, like no crack kind of character, and she has like particular ways that she like rules and things that she always like that she wants to live. She always feels like her maids are stealing from her, so she's quite a paranoid character as well. And then she has 2 brothers, and we see one brother is kind of a bit of a womanizer. He always has a different girlfriend on his arm, and then one day he tells her that his current girlfriend Eva is going to live with her in the house for the summer, and because he actually technically owns the house as the oldest brother, she can't really say no. And this girl called Eva ends up moving in with Isabel, and the 2 of them really don't get along. They're kind of rubbing each other up the wrong way. There's like this really big tension between the 2 of them, and we see kind of them circling each other, kind of like cats almost in a way, until like there's kind of this implosion between the 2 of them. I really enjoyed this. I thought as a debut novel it's really good. It's focusing on a particular point in Dutch history as well, which I think is really interesting, and maybe one that is kind of like this kind of dark, kind of grotty type of history that, like, you know, you wouldn't really want to look back on or remember, but it's important again to think about, especially I feel like with other things that are happening in the world right now in terms of Gaza and Palestine. I think some of the history that is being talked about in this book is very important to remember, and yeah, I think this was really good. I gave this a solid 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it. I wouldn't say it's like the sexiest book ever. Like some like description of this is that it's like deeply sexy. I wouldn't say it's that. However, I still did enjoy it. And I will definitely be reading more from the author. After that, I read a Regency romance called The Viscount Made Me Do It by Diana Quincy. This is the second book in her Clandestine Affairs it's like a trilogy, but you can read them all as standalone, so you're just kind of following a couple of different people in the same family. And we are following a character who basically when he was younger, his parents were murdered when he was in the house, and everyone for some reason, even though he was only like 14 or 15 or something, everyone seems to think that he must have had a hand in his parents' murder. So he's kind of been living away from society. He just feels very deeply troubled and ashamed for things around his parents' murder, and yeah, he just basically just doesn't trust anyone in society. But and then one day he sees this woman who is a bone setter, and she's wearing a necklace that he recognizes because the last time he saw that necklace, it was on the neck of his mother before she was murdered, and he obviously needs to know more about this woman, where she got this necklace, and he ends up obviously going to her, making an appointment, not really believing that she can actually help him with his injury, but she does. But he is completely intrigued by her, very, very attracted to her, and the two of them end up with this kind of friendship, borderline romantic relationship, as she helps him try and figure out more about how the necklace ended up in her family's possessions, and that obviously she ended up with it, and what may have happened, like some of the secrets that behind his mother and father's murder, and the two of them obviously get closer as they do all of this. This was fun. I really enjoyed it. I do love that Diana Quincy always has characters of kind of Arab descent in her books, because she is Arab American, I believe, so she always has characters who are not non-white characters with different culture and food and dancing and everything like that in her Regency romances, which I just think are nice, and like, a bit of a breath of fresh air from some of the other ones out there, which is just like, white on white romances all the time. So yeah, I did. Yeah, as I said, I did enjoy this. I think some of the twists and like kind of reveals in this were very obvious from the start. Like, it's very obvious who kind of the big bad it is in it. But I still did enjoy this. Especially, I really enjoyed the bone setting part of this. I think it's just a fascinating, like, profession in history, and particularly how bone setters were treated by normal doctors. And I also think it's similar to how like midwives would have been treated, and how midwifery was kind of like pushed to the side for modern medicine in a way. And I think we see the same thing with bone setting in this. And yeah, I just really liked seeing that, so I gave this one a solid 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it, and I'm going to try and read the rest of the series soon. After that, I read a thriller, and that was The Baby Group by Jade Lee Wright. She was actually Boho Bookworm over here on BookTube. And this is a very fun, very fast-paced thriller. We're following Darcy, who is, she's like very pregnant at the start of the book. She's just moved to this new kind of cozy, quiet town with her fiance, and she joins kind of a baby, kind of a prenatal baby group with her fiance to kind of learn more about, obviously, birth and babies and everything that entails, and then also to kind of get to know people in the area. And we see her kind of the group immediately kind of become very, very close in it, and like do certain things together, like all the mums and the pregnant mums and like even the dads and stuff kind of get together and do things. But we see Darcy has a lot of kind of like anxiety around her relationship, her past, and then also just her pregnancy in general, and we see how all that affects her, and she's quite paranoid in ways that like someone is out to get her, and out to potentially get her, like to harm her and her baby. And we see like just things happen that kind of don't help with this, and that all just like mounts until like the end of the book. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really fast paced. It was kind of one of these ones that I read within like a couple of days because I just couldn't put it down, and I felt like some of the things around, obviously I was pregnant when I was reading this as well, so some of the things around pregnancy and your hormones and feelings and stuff like that were very very relatable and very true in terms of like what I could, like how I, and very true in my experience. And then also I did think like some of the actions around like the baby group, in terms of like how quickly all the mums became bonded, and then how quickly, and like some of the actions of the dads in the group I felt were like really weird. Like some of the things, like they went out and like were drinking before coming back to their pregnant wives, and like in the middle of the day, and I just felt that was really weird in terms of people who didn't really know each other that well, that they'd all go out and like get quite drunk before returning to their pregnant partners. It just felt like very, I don't know, just a little bit like, I feel like that's just like a super red flag for someone to do that, and for the whole group of expectant dads to do that is like just one massive big red flag. And then I do feel like we do kind of get a teaser at the start of the book about like what's going to happen at the end, and you're kind of building to that moment, and there's this really big tension building to that moment. And then after that there's a little bit of like, basically there's like, an aftermath of that, and I felt the aftermath was a little bit, I wouldn't say dragged out, but it just felt like because we had such this high tension moment and we were reaching up for it, then suddenly we were kind of back to kind of, in terms of pacing, it kind of felt a bit like pared back then, and it was a little bit of a whiplash, I guess you would say. Well, I did really enjoy this one, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I'll definitely be reading Jade's next novel as well, because yeah, this one really impressed me. I did really enjoy it. And then I read one of my favourite books of the year, and this was an audiobook as well, and it was Ordinary Saints by Niamh and Mhaoileoin. And this one we are following a character called Jacinta, or she prefers to be known as Jay. And we're meeting her as someone in there, I think she's like in her mid-20s, she's living in London, and she is in a gay relationship with another woman. And we learn at the very, very start of this book that her brother died when she was a teenager, and he died while he was in Rome training to be a priest. And we kind of flash back and forth between Jay's present life in London and then her childhood and growing up with her parents, who were obviously quite religious, her brother who had a religious calling and obviously went on to try and join the priesthood, and how a lot of that all kind of, you know, affected her life in a way, and her relationship with the church, her relationship with her parents and her brother, and then how it all affected her growing up in terms of grief as well, for her brother, and also her own queer identity and how that conflicts with what her, you know, her parents' belief in terms of with the church, and what the church preaches against like people who are homosexual. And we see a lot of this all kind of explored. It's like trauma, joy, queer identity, grief, parent relationships, the church in Ireland. Like, there's a lot of things being covered in this book, but I felt it was just very, very good. I thought the character of Jacinta was really good. I felt the book explored people's relationships, particularly people like who would be like millennial or like, you know, younger people in Ireland. I felt like the church explored what our relationship with, so I felt like the novel explored what our relationship with the church would be like very, very well, and it did it in a way that wasn't insulting in any way towards the church. I felt it was all done still quite respectfully, and it wasn't a bashing of people who are religious. It was just an exploration of this character's own views in terms of her experiences in terms of the church, and also her experiences in terms of her own sexuality, and then also how it all affects her relationship with her parents. And she, like at the start of the book, her relationship with her parents is quite bad. She's not estranged, but you know, she wouldn't have a very close relationship with them. She finds some conversations with them very, very difficult, and there's a massive growth we see from the start of the book to the end of the book in terms of those relationships, which was really, really lovely to see. And then also I just loved seeing her relationship with her brother, and how much she loved her brother, and the way this dealt with grief in terms of, like, you know, grief can get easier to live with, but that doesn't mean that now and again it doesn't just floor you, even if it's been 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. That grief of missing someone and loving someone that you'll never be able to see again can still just be absolutely devastating, no matter how long it's been since the death occurred. And also all of this is also, at the start of the book you find out that her brother has been raised to like raised to be canonized, to be a saint. So all of this we see how her brother might become a saint, and her feelings about that, and also the process of that, which is like fairly interesting to read about because you don't really hear about that often. Yeah, that was just a very interesting part of the novel, and this book has one of the best first lines of a book that I've ever read. It really just sucks you in straight away, and yeah, I really, really loved it. So this was an easy 5 out of 5 stars for me. Definitely will be reading more by Niamh and Mhaoileoin. Definitely like a really good voice now in Irish fiction. I feel like is one to watch. So I can't wait to see what she writes next. Then I continued with a kind of thriller mystery series that I've been reading, and that is The Devil's Advocate, which is the 6th Eddie Flynn book, though I've actually only read 3 of them, I think. And in this one we're following Eddie Flynn, who is a defence lawyer, and he has to go to kind of the deep south in America with his team to try and help this young boy who is on death row accused of a murder that he actually didn't commit. And one of the things around this as well is there's like a DA who has, you know, brought the death sentence against this boy, and he has one of like the highest rates of sentencing people to death, like to death row, because he himself kind of gets off watching people die by his order. So he's kind of like a serial killer, but in like this roundabout, legal way of being a serial killer. And we see Eddie Flynn up against him and kind of the dirty ways in which this man will do anything to try and get people like on death row, even if they haven't actually committed the crime that they're being accused of. And we're also seeing like a lot of like in this small town, there's a lot of like deep set racial issues in this town. The boy that is being accused of murder is a young black boy, and the girl who he's been accused of murdering, it was this young white girl. And we see how that has really kind of brought these racial tensions in the town, and also like just these small town prejudices and how dangerous it is for Eddie and his team to be in this town. It's kind of like one of these things where like, you know, anyone could just suddenly disappear in the swamp, and nothing would ever be said again, and they'll never be found. So it's kind of one of those situations. I was just hooked onto this. I just thought the story was really, really good. It's one of those ones that will really make your blood burn in terms of, or blood boil, in terms of the racism in it, the injustices, the police corruption, like the small town political and police corruption, everything like that. But it definitely just kept me completely gripped. I really, really enjoyed it. The previous Eddie Flynn book before this one, I actually didn't enjoy that much, but this one was really, really good, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. It reminded me of kind of the what's that show with True Detective, kind of like that kind of style, or Mississippi Burning, that movie. Like it kind of reminded me of that kind of gritty kind of or even it actually kind of not like kind of slightly reminded me as well like the Karen Slaughter Grant County series. So if you like that series, you'll probably like this this book in particular. And all of these books can be read as standalones as well. You don't need to read the series, but you can read each one as a standalone and you would still get a lot out of it. But yeah, this was fast paced, it was gritty, engaging, exciting. So yeah, 5 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. And then another one I really enjoyed was So Thrilled for You by Holly Bourne, and this is one again that I kind of read right at the right time, as it's centering around like motherhood and pregnancy, friendship, and kind of these societal expectations on women as they become mothers or they don't become mothers, whether they choose to, whether they can't, whether they don't want to. Yeah, it kind of looks at all of these aspects of motherhood and being a woman in today's society. We are following a group of friends. One of them is quite heavily pregnant and she's about to have her baby shower. It is like a very, very, very hot day in the summer. So she is like dying being heavily pregnant on a very, very hot day in a house that is mostly made of glass. And then we see her different friends. So one of her friends is kind of like this real type A character who is like maniacally organizing this baby shower and has done like gone above and beyond what the pregnant friend has asked for, and it's kind of a lot of, she's someone who has been experiencing infertility and she's kind of giving her friend the baby shower that she herself would have always wanted, but we see how that kind of brings up some tensions as well, because the pregnant friend like doesn't really want any of this, so she is just kind of getting kind of more irritated by Charlotte, her friend, as the day goes on. We also see a character who is coming up with her child, who is about 9 or 10 months, I think, and she's really, really, really struggling with motherhood and like postpartum depression. And we see like, so yeah, like fair warning, like she's really struggling with being a mother, and she's finding it really difficult. She's feeling really isolated, really estranged from her friends, like just really separate, and yeah, really disassociated from like her normal life and how to get back to it, and her relationship is struggling, and yeah, we see her really, really struggling. So I feel like that's a very visceral, real thing in this book, and that I feel like a lot of women who have gone through it, who've gone through that postpartum experience, would really resonate with. So but just a fair warning that like she does have some bad kind of mental health thoughts and kind of anxiety and stuff in the book. And then we're following another character who is child free. She's not in a serious relationship, but she doesn't want children either. She's child free by choice, and she has just started her new business. So like she's had her baby in her own way, so she is not feeling supported by her friends in the same way if she had like, you know, announced an engagement or a pregnancy, and like, you know, in terms of that, she's kind of saying like, why aren't my achievements being celebrated the same way that these ones are? So we see that kind of society, you know, like what is deemed successful in society as a way in terms of being a mother. We see that in this being kind of explored very well. But this was just really pacey. Like, there's funny bits in it, but there's also just so many real, like, this like borderlines on satirical in terms of the over the top things that happen in this book. But the book is really, really fast paced. I just flew through it. We see obviously this really big thing happen at this like at the start, and the characters are all being they're all being interviewed about this thing that has happened. So we're seeing the build up to that. And it's this was really, really good. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think even if you're not like a parent or like want to be a parent, I still think you'd get a lot out of this. It's just a very fun, pacey book. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. Then after that, I read a book that I really thought I was going to enjoy. It's one I've heard quite a lot about. That's The Alternatives by Caoilinn Hughes. And in this one, we're following 4 sisters. And we follow them as the oldest one has like disappeared, and the other three are trying to figure out where she went. And eventually they do figure out where she went, and they all take a trip to go and see her in this like remote part of Ireland in this little cottage, and to see like what's going on with her and why she's disappeared, and like to maybe bring her back to normal society. And their parents died when they were quite young, and this older sister had looked after them, and we see them all have different relationships with each other, but they're all like really, really clever as well. They're all like have like basically like PhDs in different things, and so they're all like just this really clever family. And I feel like I don't really know what the point of this book was. I read it and I was like, why? I don't get it. Like, I just don't understand what I was supposed to get out of this book. I didn't find it necessarily entertaining in any way. I found parts of it were very hard to get through because, as I said, the characters are all like really, really smart, and some of them go on they go on like these monologues about different things, whether it's like science or history or philosophy. They go on these like monologues about these things. Or like lectures and stuff like that I'm like, I really don't care about this, and as a reader I don't really see why we have to read pages and pages about these things that like really have like nothing to do with the actual story. There were parts of the book that were done in like script form, as if we were reading a play or like a screenplay screenplay, and I really enjoyed those parts because it actually made the book faster. But as I said, I liked the dialogue between the sisters when they were talking to each other, and we were kind of seeing parts of their relationship with each other through how they spoke to each other and how they spoke to each other about their past and stuff. But yeah, I just didn't get anything out of this book. Really didn't like it, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I said the writing wasn't terrible in it, I just didn't see the point of the story. Then I read a series of essays, and that was Expecting the Inner Life of Pregnancy by Chitra Ramaswamy. And this one was one that I'd had like kind of reserved for my library for a while, and it was one I really thought I was going to enjoy because it's like kind of 9 essays for the 9 months of pregnancy, and it's kind of looking at it through like a literary sense as well. So we get a lot of like references to like Sylvia Plath and like, you know, other, and like Frida Kahlo and other kind of women in art and writing and stuff like that. But yeah, I just didn't really like this one either. It was okay. I just felt like there were just parts of it that just, I don't know whether it was too artsy for me maybe, that I just didn't connect with it as much as I wanted to. And then as well, I felt like it ends exactly kind of like when the baby's born. The one bit I did kind of resonate the most with was her kind of waiting for the baby to be born. I think that was because I was reading it around the same time that I was at that point where like anything could happen at any day. So I was relating to that experience of just that waiting for something to happen. But then it does end like once the baby's born, and I feel like she's really missing out on having an essay about postpartum, even if it's just like the first couple of weeks or first days after the baby's born. I feel like the story lacked something that that had that part of it. So I gave that a 3 out of 5 stars. And then I read another non-fiction that had kind of been on my NetGalley backlist for a while. And this is What Dementia Teaches Us About Love by Nikki Gerard. And this is actually the Nikki from the Nikki French books, that are like thriller books. So Nikki Gerard is the wife pairing of the authors that write those books. And this, she's talking about her experiences of her father, who unfortunately died of dementia. And she also, like this, he was in hospital during COVID, and she talks about how the COVID restrictions really led to his decline, and how there should have been so much more support, particularly for dementia patients, where seeing their family is so not seeing a family is so detrimental to their decline with the disease. She's just talking about dementia as a whole, what we know about dementia, then in terms of caring for dementia patients, being family, friends, and then also talking to people who have dementia, and then also people who are caring for people with dementia, and kind of looking at it in all aspects in that way. I think the book is very touching in many ways. I don't think there's many people who haven't been affected in some way, whether it's someone directly related to you, or somehow someone in your family or a friend or someone who has been affected by dementia, and what a cruel illness it is. So yeah, I think it's very heartbreaking at times, this book, and I feel like if you have I say some parts of this could be very hard if you have a very direct experience of maybe caring for someone with dementia. It could be hard to read, but maybe it could also be cathartic as well. So yeah, I gave this a 3.5 to 4 stars. And then the last book I read in June was also a real NetGalley backlist. I've had this quite a while that I needed to read, and that was As You Wish by Chelsea Sedoti, and this is a YA contemporary, which I don't read a lot of anymore, but this one did end up surprising me. This does actually have a little bit of magical realism in it as well. In this one, we are following a character called Eldon, who lives in this town near Las Vegas in Nevada, and he lives in this small town that has a little bit of a secret, in that when everyone in this town, when they are 18 years old, they go into this cave and they can make a wish, and the wish comes true, but it only works within the confines of this town. So say if someone says, I want to be the strongest person alive, they will be the strongest person in that town, but once they leave that town, they would no longer be the strongest person. So obviously a lot of people have made many wishes over the years. You have a lot of people who wish for money, and they live a very, very comfortable life within this town, and it's basically one of these towns where no one ever really leaves because of the kind of rules and regulations, I guess, around the wishes. A lot of people never leave, and we're seeing Eldon, who his family have recently suffered a tragedy, and he's under a lot of pressure from his parents to wish for money for his 18th birthday, but he doesn't really know what he wants to wish for, and he's having kind of a lot of thoughts about what to do in terms of his wish, and he starts interviewing some people around the town to see what they wished for and how they feel about their wishes afterwards, if they feel like they made the right choices or not. And we're seeing him obviously struggle with things that have been going on with his family and stuff, and friendship issues and romance issues and all sorts of things. This one I actually did really like. I loved the idea of this town right beside kind of Area 51 and Las Vegas and stuff, that people would just bypass, having this little kind of this wishing cave, and how the wishes would come true. I just thought it was really cool. I thought we could have done a little bit more. We could have had more about the history of that wish cave, and more of how it came about, and just the background of the wishes. I felt would have been really interesting to see. And this one was a really strong kind of 4 out of 5 stars for me for the majority of the book until the very end. And because of something that Eldon does, that I was like, are you actually kidding me that you did that? If he did that, I would be so mad at him. I'd be so mad if I was in the town and he did what he did. I just felt it kind of really spoiled the end of the book for me. So I gave this a 3.25 stars, because I just was it might even just be a 3 stars, to be honest, because I just felt the decision he made was so shitty, that I just was I can't give you any more than a 3 stars because of this, even though I did actually enjoy the most of the book. I have read another book by this author before, which I actually really hated, so I don't think I'd be reading any more from her, though I don't read a lot of YA contemporary anymore, really. So yeah, and that was it for my reading in June. I got a lot read, and then baby came, and July not a lot was read, and August has been a little bit better, so I will be combining my July and August wrap-ups, because as I said, July I didn't read that much, as I was adjusting to life, but I do have a reading vlog for July, so I will leave that linked up above. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a comment down below about any of the books that you have read recently, if you've read any of these books, what you think, and I will see you guys again next time.